Hello, welcome to the Myth-Busting Neurodiverse Relationships podcast. I'm Natalie Roberts and I'm here with my co-host, Heather Parks. We've both been in our neurodiverse relationships and families for more than 25 years. We met 10 years ago when we were feeling really desperate and trying to solve a lot of issues in our relationship and our families. We've been journeying since then. We've found many more positive and hopeful ways to solve, resolve, repair, reconnect in those relationships and in our families, in our lives. And we now co-host also Loving Difference online, giving hope and a way forward for neurodiverse relationships. In this podcast, though, we're busting the myths about neurodiverse relationships, which we had when we started this journey, that we've realized aren't true, and that actually were preventing us from recovering and having the relationships with our partners and children that we wanted. So we want to dispel these myths and bring you hope that absolutely things can change. So whether you're out and about or comfy with a cuppa, let's dive into our next conversation. See you there.
Hello, Coach Natalie Roberts here. Welcome back to the Myth-Busting Neurodiverse Relationships podcast. Just a quick intro from me today to say that this episode is a recording from a panel discussion that we took part in for Jodi Carlton's podcast. And she will introduce it and you can listen to a number of different professionals talking about a number of different topics relating to neurodiverse relationships. Heather and I took part. We've really enjoyed the conversation. We hope you do too. So dive in. And if you would like to find out more about coaching with us, there'll be more details at the end, or come find us at lovingdifference.net. Enjoy.
Hello, and welcome to Season 5 of the Your Neurodiverse Relationship podcast. I'm Jodi Carlton, your host, and I'm a neurodiverse relationship expert. But like so many of you, I've been on my own journey of discovering and understanding neurodiversity, both in my personal life with my family members and even myself, and professionally as a therapist and now relationship coach to people around the world. I'm often asked, can neurodiverse partner relationships actually work? And the answer is absolutely they can. Just like any relationship, there are core variables that influence whether or not you'll thrive as a couple. Neurodiverse relationships are no different, but they have the added layer of being neurodiverse, where one or both partners is neurodivergent. So this season, I've got a lineup of couples and partners who are in neurodiverse relationships that are working. They get real personal with me about the challenges they have faced and how they've overcome those challenges in their relationships. Let's get started. So this episode is the first of several that we broke into different episodes where I meet with my panel of neurodiverse professionals. These are my trusted colleagues in this field of neurodiversity. We have psychologists, therapists, coaches. We've come together to create a think tank, if you will, about neurodiversity. And so I asked them to join me in a conversation about this topic. Can neurodiverse relationships work? Now, many of the panelists are also individual guests on this season, but I think you're going to find that this panel discussion with, I think there's 12 of us, is going to be super valuable to you. So first, they're going to introduce themselves. So, Laura, let's start with you.
Everybody, I'm Laura Schreiner. I'm a clinical therapist and I work in Illinois primarily. I'm 20 years into practicing therapy and I have a neurodiverse family. So I'm really happy to be here today sharing and exchanging with each other.
My name is Gianna Smith and I'm a resilience coach. And that means that I help people learn how to regulate their nervous system. I myself have ADHD and also have some family that are neurodivergent.
Hi, I'm Natalie Roberts. I'm a relationship coach, coaching individuals in neurodiverse relationships and families. I'm in a neurodiverse relationship and family myself, have been for over 25 years. I identify as neuroqueer, a co-host Loving Difference online, and I also co-host the Myth-Busting Neurodiverse Relationships podcast with Heather Parks.
Hi, I'm Heather Parks. I'm a somatic coach and I coach people in neurodiverse relationships and families through a nervous system lens, using that as a perspective, trying to increase the level of safety that everyone's experiencing in the systemic family system. I co-host Loving Difference with Natalie and the Myth-Busting podcast.
Hi, I'm Mona Kay, and I'm the host of the Neurodiverse Love podcast. I also hosted the Neurodiverse Love conference, and I am working on the Neurodiverse Love documentary. And I identify as ADHD and was in a neurodiverse marriage for 30 years.
Hi, Heidi Hatme here, and I am an adult autism coach, ages 25 and over. And I too am in a neurodiverse marriage and family, 22 years in with that. I'm also a co-founder of autisticvoiceoverartist.org, a new nonprofit supporting adults who want to learn and thrive in the voiceover industry.
Hi, I'm Dr. Stephanie, and I am a former licensed professional counselor, now neurodiverse relationship and family coach. My journey into neurodiversity started when my daughter was identified with what was called Asperger's back in 2005, and then my husband was identified in 2019. I am in a happy and healthy neurodiverse relationship, and my husband and I host a podcast where we talk about the intersection of autism or neurodiversity and faith.
Hi, I'm Robin Tate. I'm a neurodivergent woman. I was diagnosed 20 years ago. I own my own life and relationship coaching practice that specializes in working with neurodivergent people and neurodiverse couples. I have a background in education as well as counseling, and coaching just seems to be the perfect blend. You can reach me anywhere in the world at this point. So exciting stuff.
Hi, I'm Barbara Grant, and I am a neurodiverse couples coach, also working with the individual partners who are in a neurodiverse relationship. I've even worked with their adult children or teenage children. I have a master's in marriage and family therapy. I've been coaching people for 25 years. Instead of going into therapy, I went into coaching because I want to address the need worldwide and not have any limitation by state licensing. I'm going to be with Dr. Stephanie launching the Neurodiverse Couples Coaches Corner podcast, and that'll be coming out soon. And also Stephanie wrote this book, which I edited, and I'm an author of the Uniquely Us book, all about neurodiverse marriage. So that'll be coming out in March of 2025.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Barbara. And if you want to hear even more about that, be sure and reference my interview with Stephanie and Dan in this series as well, where they share a lot more about the book, and really glad and excited for that to hit the shelves. And Debbie, tell us about you.
Yeah, I'm Debbie King. I've been counsellor for 20 years. Started specialising 8 years ago in neurodiversity when I found out my husband was on the spectrum. My daughter's recently been diagnosed with ADHD, so mainly working with couples, and I work globally and also for a charity here in the UK as well.
Thank you so much. And I think most of you listening to my podcast may be already familiar with me, but if not, I'm Jodi Carlton, and I was a licensed therapist in Georgia for about 19 years, but I, like so many of the others here, have transitioned over to coaching so I can reach people worldwide. And my journey started with my daughter when she was diagnosed with what was then called Asperger's when she was 5. And then ever since then, it's been an interesting journey of discovery, more recently realizing I'm ADHD, also that her brother is ADHD, that their dad is autistic, my mom is autistic. And it's all in the family, which so many people here can relate to. And so I have more recently, I started specializing in working with autistic teenagers and their parents about 15 years ago, but really saw a gap in the adult neurodiverse couple and relationship realm when my marriage struggled so much and ended in 2016. And so it's, as so many, I just want to share with people who are watching and listening that we have a mix here of people who are still in marriages and people who are no longer in their neurodiverse marriages, yet we are still here to talk about how neurodiverse relationships can work. And I think that's an important message that I want to share. We do a lot of talking about the problems and the challenges. And I want to talk about what makes a neurodiverse relationship successful and what differentiates that from a neurodiverse relationship that is unlikely to be successful. And my take on that is a neurodiverse relationship is no different than a neurotypical relationship in that there are core features and characteristics that make a relationship work and core features and characteristics that are likely to end up in a relationship failure. And in neurodiverse relationships, we have that same dynamic. So just because you're in a neurodiverse relationship, the message here today is not it can work. It might not, but it might. So I want us to talk. I asked this group of colleagues that I trust and admire, everyone here on this panel, and I asked them to come together with me and have a conversation about it. So I appreciate you all being here so much, and I know that this is going to really benefit so many people, this conversation. So I'd like to just start with the question of, since we're here to talk about what makes neurodiverse relationships work, let's start with the question of what are some of the core characteristics that you've seen in your own marriage and your own relationships, or in the people that you work with, that contribute to the success of a marriage. Stephanie, let's start with you.
Thank you. I think starting off, language matters. And so as you approach your relationship in the light of being a neurodiverse relationship, especially if there's mixed neurotypes, which can mean several things, imagine if you said to a child who had a diagnosis, I need to lower my expectations of you and your potential. What would that feel like? And so I think as we enter a neurodiverse relationship, it starts with changing the expectations that we're not a neurotypical couple. So we cannot go from a Hallmark neurotypical couple script, but we're not lowering our expectations. That doesn't sound good to either party to say, I basically don't believe in you. I don't believe in us. We're just going to, endure each other. So I think changing it to I'm changing my expectations based on what's realistic, based on the resources that we have and the support that we have, and making it work for whatever that means for you. I think that's really important starting off.
Stephanie, I think that's so important too, that lowering expectations is such a disempowering concept versus adjusting. Robin, what are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts kind of expound on what Stephanie was saying, but just this foundational teamwork mentality rather than it being us against each other or you being my problem and me being your problem, really just envisioning, the problem across the room and that we together are tackling that. And even just changing language, like Stephanie was saying, is huge. But I think the next level of that, which is evidence of teamwork, is really just, I know your strengths, you know my strengths, I see your challenges, and I know my own challenges. And we're going to work together to, emphasize strengths, overcome challenges together. And it sounds so easy and beautiful when one of us is articulating it. But, it's a really long, hard walk. If you've had challenges that were unidentified and now you're kind of on opposite teams. So just that foundational mentality of getting back onto the same team and working together for each other's good, I think.
Yes, definitely. Heidi, I see that you have something you want to add.
There's so much wisdom in this room right now. I don't know how much I can add to what these beautiful people have already said. I would ditto that it changes the conversation. So it's not a me against you. It's definitely, let's look for the win here. What is our goal ultimately? And how do we meet that goal? And I would say for us personally, our faith was very important in believing in ourselves and each other and something bigger than us that would move us forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a core value that you shared as well, which is vital. If our core values are very, very different for any relationship, neurodiverse or not, that can be a real problem. Heather, what do you have to add?
So for us, it was very important that we recognised some of the things that had happened before we realised that there was neurodiversity as part of our story, and some of the harm we'd done to each other along the way in bringing us to that point, and the fact that we'd both kind of, from a nervous system point of view, really lost a lot of safety with each other, and actually trying to rebuild some of that and realising that actually wasn't specifically about the neurodiversity and that could be changed. So there was definitely things that we could work on that meant that we could get out of kind of such a defensive, activated state, less dysregulation from both people or from all the family actually in our situation, and really move on from there. I think it's a kind of acknowledging, there's some kind of acknowledgement that we've not been doing the best for each other, accepting some of where we're at now, and how can we from now on go forward with some new tools and some new understanding and some new perspectives. So I think that's been really helpful for us.
Yes, absolutely. And as far as nervous system regulation and safety, Janet, can I just ask you to weigh in now? Because I think that's a perfect segue, since this is what you do a lot of work with.
Sure, I would love to. Yeah, you caught me just trying to raise my hand. Yeah, I really love what Heather has shared. And I think a piece of this is recognizing that your regulation is up to you. Oftentimes we can reach toward the people around us and try to get them to help us co-regulate. But if there isn't that established safety, we're going to struggle. And oftentimes that'll push us into more dysregulation. And so I think one of, in addition to changing language and something that Barbara might share about taking grace and space, because that's her way of describing that. She can share more about that. But I think part of that process is then going, okay, what do I need to do to settle my nervous system and find regulation? And what do I need to do consistently to live in that and walk that out? Because that will help establish that emotional safety for myself first, and then for the people around me.
Right. Yes. Thank you. So Barbara, let's jump over to you then.
Well, thanks. Yeah, the grace and space is kind of where I start with couples, because there's so much trauma in them, likely even trauma that began before the relationship, that may come from their family of origin. It may be an insecure attachment style. Often there's an opposite attachment style. There's a overly anxious, persistent attachment in one, chasing, and there's an avoidant attachment style in the other, retreating, backing off, shutting down. So understanding some of these dynamics came from before the marriage ever happened. And I ask couples each to get in their own lane and to begin to see their opportunities as individuals to grow and change and get healthy. And that it isn't all going to come support, love, understanding from the other. That we all need a team. I need Team Barbara in my life to be healthy. I have to have a lot of people that I can talk to, that I can relate to on different levels. And sometimes individuals are a little too enmeshed in the trauma that they're having, which is so understandable. They really are in pain and in confusion, but helping them come a little bit apart to catch their breath, to balance, to stabilize, to begin to understand themselves, the other, and to learn to reset those expectations, like Stephanie was saying, is a calming period of time. And from there, I think people can begin to see more clearly what their opportunities are to grow together as individuals and as a couple.
Yes, and yes. All of that. Mona, what do you have to add to this conversation?
Yeah, I'm going to take it to a different place, because the couple support groups that I facilitate, one of the first things that we talk about is grieving. And that is really, really important to take time to go through. I use the 7 stages of grieving rather than the 5 stages of grieving, where there might be a lot of anger. There's bargaining. If my partner would just do this, we could have a happy life, back and forth and back and forth. But the last stage is acceptance. And I think if couples can't get to acceptance of their own challenges, their own needs, their own desires and dreams that might not be realized in this relationship anymore, I think that acceptance is the key to be able to move on, whether you stay together or not. Because if you stay together and you can't accept each other, you're going to be in constant conflict. But if you can't accept yourself and the role you are playing in your relationship, and you choose to end the relationship, then you're going to take all of that with you into the next relationship. So going through that grieving process has been so critical to so many of the couples that I've worked with. And it's not easy. And you can literally go back and forth. It's not necessarily a linear process.
Mona, that's actually a perfect segue into kind of what I wanted to transition this conversation into next. What I'd really like to ask everybody now is, so we all work with clients to help them with all of this. And so let's talk a little bit about what you see. Well, one of the main reasons one of the things I want to address is so many people that come to us. We've all talked about this before. have had some very poor experiences in counseling previously. And many of us, if not almost all of us, have had that experience ourselves in our own marriages and our own relationships. And I am not here to bash therapists at all, because we all know that the training just doesn't exist about neurodiversity. Barbara, I know you just finished an LMFT program and neurodiversity was not even brought up. And so, therapists are doing the best they can with what they know. But let's talk a little bit about helping our people who are listening and watching know what to look for in a provider so that they can know that they're being helped by someone who does truly understand neurodiversity. I want us to talk about what we do with our clients, the kind of strategies you have or the type of work that you do to help really be affirming to them. What can they look for? Before we start that conversation, though, David, I see you've joined us and everybody has introduced themselves. So if you could give us a brief introduction of yourself really quickly.
I'm Dave Glick. I own a clinic called Triad Psych based in Marietta, Georgia, with a couple other offices. I'm a former special education teacher. So I have a degree, a master's in special ed and then a master's of social work. So I've been in these combined mental health, social work positions for my whole career. And that's what my clinic does. We're neurodiversity specialized. So we work with all types of neurodiversity, learning disabilities, ADD, that kind of thing. And we opened in 2003. So we're heading into year 22. So I do that. I do expert witness work, almost all of which for the past 3 years has only been in the neurodiversity space, which I never thought would happen. It's just being in the field since 1993. It's amazing to see how things have changed for the better. And the fact that we're even here, that we have this group, and it's so high powered and so high energy. I just never thought I'd see this, and I'm glad to see it. Very glad to see it. So that's what I do.
Yes, thank you.
And then my other point before is two things. Heather, you very astutely brought up looking at, getting couples to look at things from a nervous system point of view. I've never used that exact verbiage, but it's great verbiage that, so explain, look, if you want to stay married or in a relationship with this person, you've got to be, nervous system aware, at least be aware of it. And show them the YouTube video for the sensory funnel so the partner can understand what's happening during conflict. And then someone else mentioned, the belief systems. And if they're contrasting belief systems, I think a lot of what I do with my clients, whether they're coaching or psychotherapy, whatever, however you want to label it, is, do they even have a belief system? I mean, if you're so sensory defended 24/7, have you even thought about a belief system, or are you so busy just avoiding difficult sensory inputs? So oftentimes I'll stop the couple's work and so you need to develop a belief system before we go back into this, what matters to you, what doesn't.
And David, while you've got the floor here, let's just kind of go ahead and segue into this next conversation about, what are some of the key strategies and tools that you use as a therapist, as a coach, to really speak to the differences in terms of neurodiversity, or, you just mentioned you were kind of reiterating the nervous system discussion we had earlier with Heather and Jana and belief systems. What are some other types of tools and strategies you use with your clients?
Well, I have to meet them where they're at, first and foremost. But the way I was trained, and I'm a dinosaur at this point, is that character development has to be a big part of any work you do. It doesn't matter what space, doesn't matter if the patient's neurodiverse or not. So, like you said, that how do I give this person a belief system if they don't have one? I think it all comes back to the core. Then the question is, well, how do you develop a belief system in somebody? So, doing the analytic part of the work, what matters to this person? What are they good at? What are their false beliefs? What are their real beliefs? What's their family of origin? My big thing is also looking a lot at social class. So I think that's something the field has missed horribly. So I'm writing a training integrating psychotherapy and social class right now. There is going to be a section in there on neurodiversity in social class, because it's significant. So again, it's, what tools do I use? Well, first of all, the relationship has to be solid. How can I expect someone to develop a belief system if they don't have a great relationship with me?
So a solid relationship with you as a coach, as a therapist. Yeah.
Well, it's everything's relationship first, and then everything else falls into place. But, how do people develop character or develop a belief system? They probably a lot of them have never had a chance to talk about their belief systems, or how how many, was this person given a lot of choices growing up? Yes or no? Were they raised with a lot of autonomy or no autonomy? Are they so busy dodging sensory inputs? There is no to be or not to be. They want to go and make sure every day they can keep their sensory or central nervous system calm. The other thing now is that sometimes you can't adapt the environment, that you have to train, or we have to coach our clients that, look, you're going to go into a sensory intense or a sensory uncomfortable environment. You can't run away, but you have to train them to that. You can't just say, well, don't do that. You have to give them the framework to do that as well. If that makes sense. Like, it used to be a therapeutic technique called flooding, where you'd hit the person with the stimulus that gets them so upset, puts them in a dorsal state. It was the same Paul words. It just depends what the patient needs.
I want to kind of piggyback on that, and then I see some other folks who want to weigh in on this. That relationship with us as the professional that's working with folks. I think that relationship that we develop with them can be tricky when you're working with a lot of our clients are in a very antagonistic state when they first come to us. I call it the boxing ring. They see each other as threats and opponents, and so there's this natural desire for us to align from them, to feel like we're aligning with them, and somebody's coming in to get vindicated or validated or affirmed. And I think one of the things that we're able to do in this space is to affirm both partners, because we can really understand and resonate where each is coming from. And I think it's important that for our listeners and viewers to pay attention to that dynamic. If it feels one-sided, and if it also, especially if it feels like neurodiversity or autism is being pegged as the problem, that's in and of itself problematic, because then that autistic partner is going to feel like they're in front of a firing squad. So I think that's something that we all know how to do, because we are also living this life as well. And we've been working with, people for years, all of us in this space. So that being able to give that comfort, like David was describing, to each partner, and safety, making them both feel safe. I know a lot of people have come to me and said that, they really felt not targeted, but ganged up on. And sometimes it's a neurotypical partner, sometimes it's a neurodivergent partner. And I think that can be a problem just in any kind of marriage work, but neurodiversity adds a whole other layer to it. Stephanie, David, go ahead.
Real quick. I think something you just said I want to emphasize is that there's a difference between a threat and a sensory threat, or a nervous system threat. And I think that's a big part of the work we do, is saying, look, there's a threat and there's a sensory threat, and making sure both parties have to know that. The neurodiverse partner has to be able to better adapt and overcome in certain environments, and also the other partner who may be attacking needs to understand that it's content versus process here, that it may not be what you're upset about, but you've created such an unfriendly sensory environment, you're not going to accomplish anything by approaching the person.
Yeah, and I would add to that, not just sensory, but just in general, a cognitive threat, because neurodiverse individuals have, limited bandwidth, limited resources for executive function and thought processing, and that can, they can feel a partner who's very cognitive and has expectations, or a neurodivergent partner.
Are you talking more about intuition, Jodi?
No. No, when I mean cognitive threat, I mean expecting certain level of executive functioning at times when it's just like, at the end of the day. I was just having a conversation with clients yesterday that by the end of the day, the neurodivergent partner is just really depleted energetically. Their ability to even formulate thoughts and have a difficult conversation about paying the bills or relationship talk. I'm constantly telling my clients, the end of the day is really usually not the time to have important conversations about your relationship, because that...
You seem to know me well.
I know me well, David. I'm ADHD too, and I know the end of the day is not good.
What I'll never forget is, when I first opened the practice, working until 10:30, 11 at night, and the kids would be waiting for me for help. They were in elementary school, for help with their homework. I have 2 master's degrees. They should be able to do elementary school work.
That's exactly what I mean. So there's the there's the sensory and then there's the cognitive demands too.
It's a frontal lobe burnout.
Yes, exactly.
And neurodiverse people, their frontal lobes burn out faster and quicker.
Yes, right. That's exactly right. Okay, we've got a lot of folks who want to weigh in on this. So let's shift over to you, Stephanie, Dr. Stephanie.
My answer might be a little bit longer on this one. I'll try to be really succinct. But
That's okay.
The training is a huge passion of mine because the book that Barbara referenced and held up, Uniquely Us, does have a research-based component to it. And of the over 300 individuals that responded, we had an open-ended question, and that 276 people gave a long-form answer on what they wanted coaches and counselors and clergy and chaplains to know. And Barbara was one of my raters, so that it had inter-rater reliability. And also Robin is a contributor to that book as well. But 2 things that were huge was just the lack of knowledge overall on adult autism. And 2, how much an untrained person causes more harm and damage. It's not just ignorance is bliss. There is harm that is caused when you try to put a neurotypical model on a neurodiverse couple. And someone mentioned referencing that, Barbara had just come out of an LMFT program. Autism is so different than mental health issues. If you think about, it's not just clinicians that need to be updated. We need medical professionals, right? Because GPs, psychiatrists, neurologists can diagnose this. Clinical social workers can, clinical counselors can, psychologists can, school psychologists can. And so many different fields are not up to date. My daughter was just recently in a teacher education program, and they got to the part about autism, and the textbook had just been updated a couple of years ago, and they were lumping autism and IQ together. And my daughter raised her hand and said, I have very high IQ and I have autism, and I disagree, with what this textbook is stating. And the professor argued with her that she could not be on the autism spectrum because she was in college, that she could not be sitting in this class right now because of her autism. And so even our educators who are educating the people going into all of these fields, our colleges, our universities are not updated. So I'm very passionate about that. And the second thing I'm really passionate about is my field. I really talk about the convergence of faith and autism and neurodiverse couples. And we're not therapy bashing, but however, I do have to say something very strong. A lot of the Christian self-help books that are out there for the couples are usually based on that pastor or that counselor's personal theology, their personal belief system, something that's worked in their 20 or 30 clients, maybe they had over pastoral counseling. They wrote a book that became a bestseller, and now that becomes almost gospel. And those books that teach very simple things like just pray more, submit more, go to church more, give more money to your church, hope. And it's such a hyper spiritualized approach that doesn't take into account the nervous system, which many people talked about, neuroscience, how the brain works, neurology, emotional regulation. It's so hyper spiritual. It also then is demoralizing and soul crushing that this couple thinks they're praying more and doing all the things, and they're not getting aid or help. And so not only is it traumatizing that it's not helping their marriage, it's like, I'm not a good enough faith-filled person either. So we're just rushing people. So I really want anyone out there who is faith-based at all, you really, really need to understand neurology, and please get training so that you're helping and not harming.
Stephanie, I'm so glad you brought all of that up. And I just want to say that any of you who are listening who are therapists, pastoral counselors, but also if you are someone who's needing those services, Stephanie is such a leading expert in all of that. All of our credentials and bios are in the show notes. And Stephanie has so many resources for you. A couple of the panelists here, Barbara and Robin, have co-authored with her, done research with her. A lot of us have done podcasts with her. But Stephanie, also, can you share a bit? I know you have some training programs as well, because I think what you've said, the warning to therapists, we need to issue a warning, an actual warning to therapists. And all of us here have talked about, we're very passionate about a paradigm shift about neurodiversity. And that's one of the reasons why we've all come together to meet regularly and talk about this so that we can start really educating the world, including the other providers out there. And so I think it is useful to say, if you don't have the proper knowledge, training, experience in neurodiversity, don't try it with your clients because you know somebody who's autistic, or maybe even you've taken a CEU workshop. You really need to get very specific training. And Stephanie, can you share a little bit about the training modules that you have that are available on your website?
Yes. So, my other degrees before my doctorate was, psychology and counseling and conflict resolution. When I went back to school, I actually got my doctorate in education and did my dissertation on autism and research from its origins and the DSM and why it's changing, all of that. And there's so many things. Language is changing. So even as a person in the field, I would never say, oh, I've learned it all. I've done enough. I continue to look at research. I'm continuing to read books. I'm continuing to talk to you all over the world because you live in countries that are maybe doing things. So the harm is the shame that becomes part of the issue when you're either shaming the neurotypical person because they're not getting over it or they're in trauma, or you're shaming the person who's on the spectrum because they don't have the cognitive load at the end of the day to do certain things. And so when there's already trauma and now there's shame and possibly spiritual shame on top of it, it's just like another load that doesn't need to be on an already complex situation. And complex doesn't mean bad. Complex just means more complex and challenging that needs different solutions. So there's a different problem set. So for me, when I decided to put together my training, it kind of incorporates all of the things from changing language. Why is autism even in the DSM when it's not a mental health disorder? It is a difference in a neurological wiring. Back in the day, we put it on Axis 2, which meant it was not a mental health disorder. But to lay people, they don't understand those things. And we know in the faith center, the number one person a faith-based couple is going to go to is their faith-based person, their rabbi, their pastor, their cleric. If they're in the army or something, like their chaplain. If they're a faith-based person, they are going to a faith-based person first. And faith-based people are the least trained in neurology and neuroscience. Scripture has its place, but it is not prescriptive on all things. It is for faith and belief and hope and core values, but it's not prescriptive on those things. So if you're especially faith-based and you're clergy, chaplain, counselor, coach, whatever you're doing to help marriages, my training will help you with some basics in neuroscience, basics in autism, why you don't keep the couple together because of what everyone's mentioned, the central nervous system, dysregulation, polyvagal. If you've got two dysregulated people sitting in a room and then you try to have them resolve conflict and they're both dysregulated, that doesn't feel good to them. And all you're doing is mediating a fight. But if you also aren't trained in how to help them regulate. So sometimes speaking to them alone and then teaching them regulation, everything that everyone's mentioned is just so holistic. I guess that's my big thing. It's a holistic approach. The training that you may have in your master's degree or work, but then you need to really understand the brain differences, and what the challenges that you're working with to help two different people of two different neurotypes work together. And then also in the research in the book, there is a myth that if two people are neurodivergent, then that's just going to make their marriage better. And that is not true. With the couples that are interviewed, really it's the sensory profiles. The neurodivergency helps understand each person's position and maybe some empathy and compassion, but the differing sensory profiles, if someone is seeking and someone is averse, that can cause huge challenges, especially in physical intimacy.
In the bedroom. I was about to say in the bedroom, that's a big one.
Oh, yes. And so understanding all of that, especially if I get a client and they have sexual issues, that is not my forte. I'm going to refer. So I think for anyone listening who works with couples, know your specialty, know your limitations, and know where to refer, because that's how you're helping if you think of it as we're all coaches trying to help, I'm not losing a client or competing with another coach. I am simply referring to someone who's got a better skill set on this. And if I'm still of value, they'll come back. But if not, then that next coach is better set for them. And I love this group because we're collaborative and we don't compete with each other. We recognize our skill sets and we don't see each other as threats. And I think that's really important in this space too.
Okay, we're going to pause there for this episode, but be sure and stay tuned for the rest of the season to keep hearing from this neurodiverse professional panel, because we have several more episodes throughout this entire season where we'll continue discussing various topics. Be sure to subscribe or follow the podcast so you won't miss any of these amazing interviews. And as always, if you're benefiting and enjoying this podcast, please give us a review. It really helps other people know that this podcast is really beneficial and worth listening to. Thanks for watching on YouTube or tuning in to your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to visit me online at jodicarlton.com for more resources. I have assessment quizzes, educational articles, courses, and more. And if you have any questions, just reach out to my team at gethelp@jodicarlton.com. Until next time. Do you think you might be autistic or neurodivergent? Or maybe you wonder about your partner? Or you just don't even know what all of that means and don't know where to start? Come on over to jodicarlton.com. I have some quizzes for you to help you identify if you or your partner have traits in common with other people diagnosed as autistic. Or maybe your relationship seems so dysfunctional and toxic, and you're wondering if maybe your partner is actually narcissistic. I have a quiz for that too. And a video course to really help you get some clarity. If you really need some help in your relationship and you don't know where to start, I also have a questionnaire that will customize recommendations of all the resources I have available to you based on your specific needs. Get access to all of this at jodicarlton.com.
If this episode has resonated with you, subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening or watching to get notifications of future episodes. To dive deeper into all of this with professional coaching, resources, and all the support you need, join us in Love Indifference via www.loveindifference.net. And we'll be back here soon.